Usually when we talk about corporate collapses on this show, we're talking about um, risky tech startups or maybe a fraud-riddled scheme like Enron.
Right, where the whole thing was a mirage from the start, a house of cards.
Exactly. We don't usually talk about national institutions that were literally, and I mean literally, nicknamed the Flying Bank.
That's what makes the Swissair story so disturbing. It wasn't a fly-by-night operation. It wasn't some dot-com bubble burst.
No.
For 70 years, this airline was, for all intents and purposes, the gold standard. It had liquidity that would make a sovereign nation jealous. It had hidden assets and a reputation for safety that was practically a religion in Switzerland.
And then in October 2001, it just stopped. It vaporized.
Yeah.
And that's the image I really want to start with today. October 2nd, 2001, you have captains in the cockpit, ready to push back from the gate. Passengers are buckled in, and suddenly the fuel trucks just drive away.
Because their corporate credit cards were declined. Can you imagine?
It's unbelievable. A company that was once worth billions couldn't pay for its own jet fuel.
Right.
So our mission today is to figure out how that happens. How do you go from being the flying bank, the very symbol of Swiss stability, to being grounded by a fuel supplier in a matter of, a few years?
Few disastrous years, yeah.
Was this just 9/11? Was it just a run of bad luck? Or was this a case of, I don't know, corporate suicide?
I'd argue it's a masterclass in hubris. I really would. It's about what happens when you believe your own marketing so much that you completely ignore basic economic geography.
Wow.
It is the story of the Icarus of the Alps. It flew too close to the sun.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's look at the flying bank era first. Because to understand the crash, you really have to understand just how high they climbed. So source materials give this sense that Swissair wasn't just an airline.
Oh no, it was a diplomatic tool. It was a symbol of the nation itself.
So where does that begin?
Absolutely. To get the full picture, we have to go all the way back to 1931. The company forms from a merger of two smaller entities, Belair and Ad Astra Aero.
Okay.
Now, context here is everything. Most European flag carriers at this time are basically government projects.
Right, state-sponsored.
Totally. They are funded by the state to project power. France, Britain, Germany, they're just pouring state money into aviation. But Swissair, it was different.
How so? They didn't take the government handout.
Not at first, no. The founders, Paul Zimmermann and Walter Mittelholzer, they didn't receive any subsidies in those early days.
Which must have been tough.
It was. But that lack of a safety net, it forced them to be incredibly aggressive on technology. I mean, if you don't have a government checking account to fall back on, you have to actually be better than the competition to survive.
Which brings us to the Lockheed Orion purchase in 1932. I was reading about this, and it seems like such a pivotal moment for their mindset.
Oh, it was huge.
It's almost like a tech startup buying the most expensive server rack available just to completely blow the competition away on speed.
That's a great analogy. It was a massive gamble. The Orion was an American plane. And you have to remember, Europe was very protectionist in the 1930s.
You flee planes built on your own continent.
You flew European planes. But Swissair bought these American single-engine planes for one reason. They were fast. Unbelievably fast for the time.
The express line, right?
Exactly, the express line. Zurich, Munich, Vienna. They were so fast that Lufthansa was, they were effectively humiliated.
Humiliated how? Like actually left in the dust?
Well, yeah. I mean, imagine you're the German national carrier, the pride of German engineering, and this little Swiss upstart is just flying circles around you with American metal.
Wow.
It actually forced the German aviation industry, specifically Heinkel, to develop the Heinkel He-70 just to try and keep up. So you have Swissair driving innovation across the entire continent just by existing.
So right from the start, their DNA is, we will pay for the best tech to be faster and better than the neighbors.
Precisely. And that premium mindset, it extended to the people, too. Which brings us to the story of Nellie Diner in 1934.
The first flight attendant in Europe? That's an amazing piece of history.
It is, but you have to look at the context. This wasn't just about service. This was marketing, pure marketing. She became a celebrity almost instantly. She was nicknamed the Angel of the Skies.
So she represented this new, modern, civilized way to travel.
That's it. She was the face of that idea.
But her story also highlights the other side of that coin, doesn't it? It was glamorous, sure, but it was incredibly dangerous.
It was tragic. She died in a crash near Vermlingen, Germany on July 27, 1934. And get this, she had only flown 79 flights.
Only 79. What was the cause?
Material fatigue. The wing of the plane, a Curtiss Condor, just broke. It's a stark reminder that this golden age we look back on was built on very, very fragile technology.
It's interesting, though, that despite that kind of tragedy, the brand just kept growing.
Mhm.
And by 1947, the structure of the company changes significantly. This is the post-war boom.
This is the moment they truly become the national carrier. The government, the federal government, the cantons, municipalities, and specifically the Swiss Federal Railways, they all buy in.
Ah, so the state finally gets involved.
They do. They acquire about 30.6% of the shares.
So now they have the official stamp of approval, and I assume a lot more capital.
A lot more. And that capital is what allows them to look west across the Atlantic, the New York route.
The holy grail of aviation, even then.
Absolutely.
But in 1947, flying from Zurich to New York isn't exactly, a direct flight with a movie and a nap.
No, it's an odyssey. We're talking about a DC-4. It took nearly 21 hours.
21 hours.
Yep. You had to stop in Shannon, Ireland. Then you had to stop in Gander, Newfoundland to refuel. It was loud. It was vibrating constantly, but it was the bridge to the new world. It was a huge deal.
And this is where the flying bank reputation really starts to solidify, isn't it? It's not just about the planes anymore. It's about their unique financial and geopolitical position during the Cold War.
This is the key insight. You've nailed it. Switzerland is neutral. In a world that is completely polarized, divided between the U.S. and the Soviets, that neutrality is a massive commercial asset.
How so?
Well, while British Airways or Pan Am were restricted from flying into certain Soviet-aligned or non-aligned airspace, or maybe they struggled with landing rights in the Middle East because of political alliances.
Swissair could go almost anywhere.
Exactly. They were the neutral broker. They could connect East and West. So they opened these incredibly exotic and very lucrative routes to destinations in Africa, the Middle East, and the Far East that others couldn't touch.
So if you were a diplomat or a spy or a multinational businessman in the 50s and 60s,
You flew Swissair because it was the connecting node for the world's elite. It was the one airline that could get you from, say, a tense capital in Africa to a financial hub in Europe without any political baggage.
so they're charging premium fares on these exclusive routes, and at the same time, they have this culture of extreme thrift and careful asset management back home.
That's the combination. That's the flying bank. Walter Berchtold, who took over as CEO in 1950, really crafted this image. He came from the railways, so he liked structure, he liked discipline.
Okay.
He's the one who brought in the modish marine blue uniforms, moving away from that old military look, and he introduced the slumberettes in first class.
Slumberettes, what were they?
They were basically these amazing sleeping chairs, fully reclining, modeled after the beds on American Pullman railway cars.
Sleeping on a plane in the 1950s, that's some serious luxury.
It was the absolute height of sophistication, but behind all that luxury, behind the scenes, they were just hoarding cash. They had immense hidden reserves, undervalued assets on the books.
So the nickname, the Flying Bank, it was actually true.
Oh, yeah. By the 1970s, financial analysts joked that Swissair was an investment bank that just happened to treat flying airplanes as a kind of expensive hobby.
They cared more about the balance sheet than the flight sheet.
That's a perfect way to put it, and that sounds great, right? Until the world starts getting violent. And the records show the 1970s were an absolute nightmare for them, security-wise.
It seems like the Flying Bank became a target.
It was a loss of innocence for the entire industry, really, but Swissair took some incredibly heavy hits. You had the 1970 crash on the Tel Aviv route,
A bomb.
a bomb in the cargo hold. It had a barometric trigger. It detonated shortly after takeoff from Zurich. 47 people died. A Convair 990. Just gone.
And then just a few months later, the Dawson's Field incident, which is like something out of a Hollywood movie.
It's unbelievable. The PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, hijacked a Swissair DC-8 along with a TWA 707 and a BOAC VC-10.
And flew them all to Jordan.
Forced them to land in the Jordanian desert at this remote, abandoned airfield called Dawson's Field. They held the passengers hostage, negotiated for the release of prisoners, and then
They blew up the planes.
blew them up on global television. It was this incredible spectacle of destruction. A Swissair plane just exploding in a fireball in the desert.
There was also that bizarre kidnapping in Buenos Aires in 1973. The station manager.
Yes. The Swissair representative in Argentina, Kurt Schmid, was kidnapped by a leftist guerrilla group called the Montoneros. He was held for 38 days.
And this is where the bank part of their name comes back into play.
Right. Because Swissair paid. They paid the ransom.
We know how much.
12.35 million Swiss francs.
Wow. That is a staggering amount of liquid cash to just hand over in 1973.
It is, and it proved two things. One, the world was becoming a very dangerous place for high-profile Western symbols. And two, Swissair had the money to make those kinds of problems go away.
They had the resources to weather these storms.
For now. But money couldn't solve the huge structural problem that was coming down the pipe in the 1980s and early 90s.
Deregulation. The word that strikes fear into the heart of every comfortable monopoly.
The end of the gentleman's club. That's what it was. For decades, European skies were rigged. It was all about high fares, protected routes, government-sanctioned duopolies.
So if you flew from London to Zurich,
British Airways and Swissair basically agreed on the price. There was no real competition. It was a license to print money for the national carriers. Then the EU starts tearing down all those walls. They wanted competition. They wanted lower fares for consumers.
and this suddenly exposes Swissair's biggest and maybe only weakness.
Their size.
They are a giant premium airline in a tiny country.
Precisely. Switzerland has a population of, at that time, maybe 7 million people. You cannot support a global long-haul network just on that domestic base. It's impossible.
You need to feed the beast.
You do. They needed to pull passengers from France, from Germany, from Italy to fill those big DC-10s and 747 flying out of Zurich.
So they see the writing on the wall and they try to merge. The Alcazar Project. I love that name. It sounds like a fortress.
It was meant to be a fortress, Project Alcazar, 1993. On paper, it was brilliant.
What was the plan?
Merge Swissair, KLM, SA, the Scandinavian airline, and Austrian airlines. Create a single, massive, central European giant that could compete with British Airways, with Air France, with Lufthansa.
It makes so much sense. So why did it fail? If it was such a good idea, why didn't it happen?
National ego, pure and simple, hubris again.
Really?
The Swiss public, the unions, and even parts of the board felt that merging with KLM, which had American partners and was seen as less premium, would dilute the precious Swiss brand.
So is this feeling of we're better than them?
Totally. They thought, we are the flying bank. Why should we share our gold with these Dutch and Scandinavians? They thought their assets were too precious to share, so they walked away from the deal.
A catastrophic mistake in hindsight.
An unbelievable mistake,
Yeah.
because it leads directly to the single most critical moment in this entire timeline. December 6, 1992, the EEA referendum.
Okay, this is a big one.
If you want to pinpoint the exact moment the death of Swissair becomes inevitable, it starts here. The Swiss people vote no to joining the European Economic Area.
We need to explain why this mattered so much for an airline. Because, trade deals can sound really boring and abstract. Why was this fatal for Swissair?
It created what was known as the island problem. Because Switzerland wasn't in the EEA, Swissair was suddenly treated as a third country carrier. And this denied them the right of cabotage.
Cabotage. Okay, we need to unpack that term. What is it?
Cabotage is basically the right for an airline from one country to operate domestic flights within another country, or, more importantly, to pick up passengers in a foreign country and fly them to a third destination.
You mean example?
Okay. Under the new EU Open Skies rules, Lufthansa could fly from Frankfurt to Paris, pick up a plane full of French passengers, and then fly them all to New York.
Right. They can tap into the French market.
Exactly. But what about Swissair?
They couldn't do that.
They could not. If Swissair flew Zurich to Paris to New York, they could only carry passengers who started their journey in Zurich. They were legally barred from selling a ticket to a French person who just wanted to go from Paris to New York.
They were locked out of the internal European market.
Completely locked out.
That sounds like a death sentence if your home market is as tiny as Switzerland's. You're just watching your competitors eat your lunch in every single neighboring country.
They were geographically trapped. They were an island in a liberalized European sky. And it gets worse. Their cost base was in high-wage Swiss francs. But their competitors were now operating in a deregulated market, driving prices down everywhere.
So they're more expensive and they have less market access.
A terrible combination. So the board panics. They realize, okay, we're isolated, we're expensive, we can't merge. We need a new strategy now.
And this is when they call the consultants.
Enter McKinsey and Company and the now infamous Hunter strategy.
The name alone, Hunter. It implies aggression. It implies strength, being on the offensive.
It does. And the logic on a PowerPoint slide probably looked compelling. It was. If we can't merge with the big boys because we walked away from Alcazar and we can't join the EU market legally, then we will buy our way in.
They wanted to build their own alliance by acquiring equity in other smaller airlines.
Correct. They wanted to create their own version of the Star Alliance or One World, but with Swissair at the center, controlling everything.
In theory, that doesn't sound completely terrible. You buy up smaller carriers, you feed their passengers into your long-haul network at Zurich. It seems logical.
In theory, yes. But in practice, you have to look at who is available to buy. I mean, the good airlines, Lufthansa, British Airways, Air France, they were already taken. They were building their own alliances. They were too big and too expensive, so who was left to hunt?
The sick, the lame, and the dying.
Exactly. They went shopping in the bargain bin of European aviation. Their first big move was buying 49.5% of Sabena, the Belgian national carrier.
Which I see referred to in the industry as such a bad experience, never again.
That was the running joke among frequent flyers, yes. And it was a financial basket case. Sabena was notoriously chronically unprofitable. The Belgian government and the powerful unions had a complete stranglehold on it. It had been losing money for years.
And Swissair thought they could fix it.
They thought they could impose Swiss efficiency on it. They poured millions upon millions into a black hole.
And it wasn't just Sabena, though. The shopping spree continued. They went into France.
Oh, the French adventure.
Yeah.
They bought stakes in Air Liberté, AOM, and Air Littoral.
I've never heard of any of them.
Exactly, and that's the point. These were second-tier, struggling French carriers with terrible labor relations, incompatible fleets, and they were constantly at war with each other.
I was looking at the fleet list for these acquisitions. It's a logistical nightmare. You're buying airlines that fly different Airbus models, different Boeing models. They have different engines. They need different spare parts. There is no synergy.
Zero synergy. You can't just swap a part from a Swissair MD-11 onto an Air Liberté A320. It doesn't work.
What was the thinking?
The CEO at the time, Philippe Bruggesser, was obsessed with volume. He was an empire builder. He thought if he just bought enough revenue, enough market share, that the profits would eventually follow. But he wasn't buying revenue. He was buying debt.
And the list goes on, right?
It does. They bought into LTU in Germany, which was a struggling charter airline with a totally different business model. They bought into Volair in Italy, LOT in Poland, even South African Airways. It was completely indiscriminate.
It sounds like a Ponzi scheme. They're using the flying bank's massive cash reserves to prop up this zombie network of failing airlines around them.
That's essentially what it was. By the summer of 2000, the numbers were just horrific. The Hunter Alliance was losing money at a rate that is difficult to comprehend.
How bad was it?
The documents show that Swissair and Sabena combined were bleeding 1 million Swiss francs per day.
$1 million a day.
And that's not all. The French and German investments, LTU and the others, were losing another $1 million a day on top of that.
So you wake up, have a coffee, and by the time you're done, Swissair has lost 2 million francs.
2 million francs every single day.
And yet, the board let this continue.
Yeah.
How do you sit in a boardroom, look at a spreadsheet with minus 2 million a day and say, stay the course?
The flying bank mentality blinded them. It was pure arrogance. They thought they had infinite resources. They thought, we are Swissair. We are Swiss. We will fix these small, mismanaged airlines. They believed the McKinsey slides over the reality of their own bank account.
Eventually, though, gravity has to kick in. In January 2001, Bruggesser, the architect of this disaster, is fired.
Right. And they bring in Moritz Suter.
Now, Suter was the founder of Crossair, which was Swissair's successful regional subsidiary. He was a real aviation guy and entrepreneur. He was seen as the savior.
The conquering hero returning to save the kingdom.
But he didn't stay long at all.
He lasted 44 days.
44 days? What happened?
He came in, he looked at the books, he saw the absolute disaster that Bruggesser had created. He tried to immediately restructure the black hole of the French airlines, got blocked by the board who were still in denial, and he essentially said, I'm out. This is unsalvageable.
That should have been the biggest red flag in history, when the savior runs away screaming after a month and a half.
You'd think so, but they just found another one. And then they bring in Mario Corti.
The last man.
Mario Corti is a truly tragic figure in this story. He wasn't an airline guy at all. He was the CFO of Nestle, a brilliant finance guy. He was brought in to be the ultimate cleanup man. But by the time he sat in the CEO's chair in March 2001, the airline was already terminal. The patient was dead. It just didn't know it yet.
And then, just when you think it can't get any worse, history decides to kick them while they're down. We have to talk about Flight 111.
The crash at Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, September 2, 1998. An MD-11 flying from New York to Geneva just falls out of the sky into the Atlantic, killing all 229 people on board.
And the cause was linked to the brand new fancy entertainment system they had just installed, right?
Yes. Faulty wiring in the in-flight entertainment system located in the ceiling above the cockpit sparked and started a fire.
The irony is just It's brutal.
It's dark. The pursuit of luxury, trying to offer the best screens, the best first-class experience, is what caused the fire that brought the plane down.
The lawsuit settlements were massive. But more importantly, it cracked that pristine image of safety.
For the first time, people questioned if Swissair was fallible. Even the flying bank wasn't 100% safe anymore. Passenger confidence started to waver.
So you have the psychological blow. Then
Yeah.
you have the massive debt load from the Hunter strategy coming due. And then September 11, 2001.
9/11 paralyzed global aviation overnight. But for Swissair, it wasn't just a pause. It was the final, fatal death blow.
Explain that, because every airline suffered.
Sure, but for a healthy airline like Lufthansa, 9/11 was a severe crisis. They parked planes, they cut costs, they got government loan guarantees, and they weathered the storm. For Swissair, which was already burning through 2 million francs a day just to exist, it was impossible. Booking numbers just vanished. The cash flow stopped completely.
So that brings us to the final frantic week of September 2001. This is where the story turns into a high-stakes financial thriller.
It does. Mario Corti goes, cap in hand, to the big Swiss banks, UBS and Credit Suisse, and basically begs for an emergency credit line, a lifeline to get them through the crisis.
And UBS, specifically the chairman at the time, Marcel Ospel, says no.
Flat out no.
Why? I mean, why let a national icon fail? This is the flag carrier. This is Switzerland.
From the bank's perspective, they looked at the books and they saw a bottomless pit. They argued that lending more money to Swissair wasn't a loan, it was a donation.
They didn't think they'd get it back.
They knew they wouldn't. They didn't believe the business model worked anymore. They were tired of throwing good money after bad.
The public reaction to that was visceral, though. I remember seeing news footage of protesters holding signs calling Ospel Bin Ospel.
They called UBS the United Bandits of Switzerland. The Swiss public felt profoundly betrayed. They couldn't separate the emotional value of the flag carrier from the cold, hard math of the balance sheet.
They thought the banks had a patriotic duty.
A duty to save the airline, regardless of the cost. But the banks held firm. Which leads us to October 2, 2001, the day of the grounding.
Walk us through the mechanics of this, because it wasn't a planned shutdown. It wasn't an orderly bankruptcy filing.
No, it was absolute chaos. Corti had announced a restructuring plan the day before, but he needed immediate cash, like right now, to keep the planes flying that day.
For fuel.
For fuel, for landing fees, for catering. The banks stalled on releasing any funds, and the fuel suppliers at Heathrow, at JFK, and even at home in Zürich, they saw the news. They knew Swissair was on the brink of collapse.
And fuel suppliers aren't in the charity business.
No, they invoked cash on delivery. They essentially told the pilots, put the cash on the hood of the truck or we don't connect the hose.
And Swissair literally didn't have the cash on hand.
Corti claimed at the time they only had about 14.5 million francs accessible. That wasn't even close to enough to cover the fuel bill for the entire global fleet for a single day. So at 15.45 that afternoon, a message goes out. Flight operations are suspended.
The stories from the staff on that day are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I read you had pilots using their personal credit cards to try and buy fuel.
Yes. Can you imagine the desperation? You have Swissair captains handing over their personal American Express cards to try and get enough kerosene to get their passengers home, but the amounts were just too high. The cards were declined.
In the hotels, the crew layovers.
The hotels kicked the crews out. Imagine being a flight attendant in Johannesburg or São Paulo. You check into your hotel after a 12-hour shift, and the front desk says, sorry, Swissair's corporate credit is no good here. You have to leave.
Unbelievable.
Crews were sleeping in airport lobbies, borrowing money from passengers to get taxis. It was a total, absolute national humiliation broadcast live around the world.
Now, there is a massive controversy here, isn't there, about the missing money. Later investigations suggested Corti might have been wrong, or at least misleading, about the cash position that day.
This is the Ernst & Young report that came out later. It's a huge point of contention. Years later, their forensic accountants claimed there was actually around 123 million francs in various accounts that could have been used that day.
That's a huge difference. 14 million versus 123 million. That's the difference between flying and grounding.
It is. Now, the defense from Corti and the management was that this money was trapped. It was in subsidiary accounts or escrow accounts or in foreign currencies that couldn't be liquidated in 2 hours to pay a fuel guy on the tarmac at Heathrow.
But to the employees who lost their jobs, their pensions.
To them, it looked like gross incompetence, or worse. They felt the grounding was unnecessary theater, that it was a deliberate act to force the government's hand. It's still bitterly debated in Switzerland today.
Regardless of whether the money was there or not, once the planes stop flying, the trust is gone forever. You can't just restart an airline after stranding 40,000 passengers around the globe.
The brand was dead. The flying bank was officially bankrupt. Those images of the entire Swissair fleet sitting idle on the tarmac in Zurich, wingtip to wingtip, they were the tombstone.
But a country like Switzerland needs connectivity. They're a global business hub. They couldn't just have no national airline. So the government initiated Project Phoenix.
Which was essentially a shell game, a very, very expensive shell game paid for by the taxpayer.
So how did it work?
They took Crossair, the regional subsidiary we mentioned earlier, the one founded by Moritz Suter. It was smaller, but it was technically still solvent. The Swiss government pumped billions of francs into it. Then, Crossair was used to buy the good assets of the dead Swissair.
So they took the planes, the routes, the valuable landing slots at Heathrow and JFK.
And most of the staff.
Yes. Bad stuff.
They left the massive debts, the hunter strategy liabilities, the pension obligations, and all the bad investments in the old Swissair corporate carcass to be liquidated over the next 20 years.
And then they just renamed Crossair.
Exactly. Crossair was renamed Swiss International Airlines. Or just Swiss, for short. A clean slate. Same planes, same staff, new logo, no debt.
But here is the ultimate crushing irony of the entire story. The whole point of the disastrous hunter strategy, the whole reason they burned through billions and billions of francs.
As to stay independent.
To stay independent and not merge with a European giant like Lufthansa.
And in 2005, just 3 years after the new Swiss launched, what happens?
They were bought by Lufthansa.
The very thing they fought so desperately against.
It's a perfect tragedy.
They spent their entire fortune trying to avoid becoming a junior partner to Lufthansa, and they ended up becoming a wholly owned subsidiary of Lufthansa, but without the fortune. It is a Greek tragedy of corporate strategy. You meet your destiny on the very road you take to avoid it.
There was a trial, wasn't there, in 2007. The whole board, all the executives were dragged into court.
The public wanted heads to roll. They were charged with mismanagement, making false statements, forgery, damaging creditors, the works.
And the verdict?
They were all acquitted. Every single one of them.
How do you lose that much money, destroy a national icon, and get acquitted?
The business judgment rule. The court basically ruled that just because a strategy is catastrophic, that doesn't mean it's criminal. They were trying to save the airline. They failed spectacularly. But stupidity or arrogance or even just bad luck isn't a crime in the corporate code.
That must have been an incredibly bitter pill to swallow for the thousands of employees who lost their life savings. Their pensions were tied up in worthless Swissair stock.
It was devastating. Many of them lost everything. It's still a deep wound in Switzerland today. If you bring up the grounding in a bar in Zurich, you will still get very, very strong opinions.
Before we wrap this up, I found one bizarre little footnote in the source material about the brand name. The name Swissair. Who owns it now? What happened to it?
This is one of the weirdest parts of the story. To prevent the trademark from expiring due to non-use, the new company, Swiss, had to license the name Swissair out.
To another airline.
Not exactly. They licensed it to a tiny aviation sports club in the U.S. and, for a few years, to a U.S. air taxi operator called Hopscotch Air.
Hopscotch Air.
Yeah. They flew small, single-engine Cirrus propeller planes on short hops around the Northeast. So for a while, if you saw the name Swissair in the sky, it wasn't a giant jumbo jet. It was a tiny four-seater plane flying over New York State.
A ghost of the flying bank.
A very, very small ghost.
So after all this, what is the takeaway here? Is this just a straightforward story about bad management, or is there a deeper, more universal lesson?
I think it's about the profound danger of exceptionalism. Swissair believed it was exempt from the rules of the market. They believed it because they were Swiss, because they were rich, because their brands stood for quality. They truly thought gravity didn't apply to them.
And they ignored the new reality.
They completely ignored the structural reality of the European market after deregulation. They tried to use financial engineering to solve what was, at its heart, a geography problem.
And when the cash from the flying bank ran out, reality won.
Geography always wins.
It really makes you think about the companies we consider safe or too big to fail today. You look at some of the tech giants or the massive banks and think, well, they have too much cash to fail. But Swissair had too much cash to fail until the day they didn't.
Cash burns very, very fast when you're fueling a bad strategy, and a 70-year reputation can burn even faster.
If you want to see what that reputation, what that hubris looked like at its absolute peak. The records mention a 1967 film called Follow Me. It's apparently a perfect time capsule of that golden age glamour.
It's worth a watch. Just, remember how the story ends.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.